Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Hertfordshire County Council's Cabinet. I'm David Williams. I'm the leader of the County Council and chairing this meeting this afternoon. I'm joined by all of my Cabinet colleagues, namely Teresa Heritage, the Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Children, Young People and Families, Derek Ashley, the Executive Member for Growth, Infrastructure, Planning and the Economy, Phil Bibby, Highways and Environment, Terry Duris, Education, Libraries and Localism, Terry Hone, Community Safety and Waste Management, Tim Hutchins, Public Health and Prevention, Richard Roberts, Adult Care and Health, and Ralph Sangster, Resources and Performance. Before we start, I want to make the following announcement in relation to COVID-19 and attendance at this meeting. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link to the County Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Cabinet are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched off if and when cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raised hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. So the first item on our agenda this afternoon are the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on the 18th of January 2021. Can I ask colleagues to confirm whether they are an accurate record of the meeting? And if I can ask you to do that in chat, please. So those are agreed. Second item on the agenda, questions from members of the Council to executive members. There are none. Agenda item number 3, public petitions. There are none. Sorry, I've just lost the order paper. Just bear with me a second. So then ahead of agenda item number 4, I just want to read a statement that relates particularly to this meeting. Members are reminded that all equalities implications and equalities impact assessments undertaken in relation to any matter on this agenda must be rigorously considered prior to any decision being reached on that matter. Members are advised that in respect of the debate concerning the Council's integrated plan, including the setting of the Council tax precept, the Standards Committee has exercised its power to grant a dispensation to all Hertfordshire County Councils from the requirement to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or a declarable interest. Accordingly, there is no requirement for any councillor to make any declaration of interest in respect of this item of business. Members are reminded that Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 provides that if a member is in arrears of council tax for 2 months or more, and they are present at a meeting where the council's budget or the precept is being considered, then they should declare this. And any such member must not vote on any matter relating to the setting of the council's budget or the precept. The provisions of Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 apply, even if there is an arrangement to pay off the arrears. So let's move on to agenda item number 4, Hertfordshire County Council's response to COVID-19. Now, this report has been circulated and was considered at the Resources Cabinet panel last week. I just want to make a few remarks on developments over recent times, and in particular the whole question of our response to lockdown. And then I know that Ralph Sangster, the member for Resources, will want to consider some of the financial implications that have impacted on our budgets and our finances over the intervening period. So in relation to the report, I just want to highlight a few things, and in particular now the question of the council's response and indeed the impact on the whole of Hertfordshire since lockdown. So it was on the 4th of January that the Prime Minister announced the new lockdown arrangements, and driven by that, there's been a real focus on the local management outbreak processes, on the question of our residents getting vaccinated, and also the arrangements that exist in relation to the clinically extremely vulnerable. Driven by the Kent variant, Hert's coronavirus incidence rate peaked at 910 cases per 100,000 population per 7 days on the 4th of January. As at the 7 days to the 16th of February, this rate has fallen to 100.5. So this represents an enormous amount of diligence and sacrifices on the part of Hertfordshire's residents, employers, the public sector, and the voluntary and community services. I really must express my thanks to everybody who has contributed to this effort to bring down the incidence rate, and indeed then the sacrifices that people have made over this period. Now, as we all know, the Prime Minister is making an announcement this afternoon about releasing the country from lockdown. I've no doubt that his wish will be that release is gradual and measured, but I do just want to highlight a few things that have been particularly important as we've addressed the pandemic over the period since lockdown began. One important initiative was the introduction of rapid testing on the 20th of January. So this is the opportunity that our residents have to get a rapid test undertaken and get the result back very quickly. I visited the site at the Healthy Hub at the Gordon Craig Theatre in Stevenage on Thursday, where one of these sites is available. And this is really important now for those people who are not symptomatic with coronavirus, but nevertheless their work takes them out into the community. They're unable to stay at home during that period, during the working day. And so there is a real wish that this becomes part of their regular routine to get rapid tests, whether they're working in public services, supermarkets, people who need to visit other people's homes as part of their working day. So there's a very strong encouragement to respond to the ability now to get rapid tests right across the county. These are services that are bookable using the Herts County Council website. The other thing I want to highlight is the work that was undertaken to address surge testing in response to a case of the South African variant being found in the EN10 area of Hertfordshire, and there was a massive response to address this, to provide a surge in testing across that part of principally Broxbourne. but it also is an area that touches on North Herts and Essex as well. And the strategy that was followed by the Director of Public Health, Jim McManus, was to provide for mobile testing units, to provide for the collection and drop-off of PCR tests, and also to conduct door-to-door test delivery and collection. And as a consequence of that, some 13,950 tests were distributed and 10,534 were completed. I have to say that to date, none of those tests, while there have been some positive tests, none of those tests have been identified as being the South African variant. But it was a phenomenal response to the particular challenge of trying to contain any incidence of the South African variant. And then the final thing I just want to touch upon is the work that's been done to support the clinically extremely vulnerable during lockdown. And as we look forward now, we know that the government is going to be redefining those who should be considered clinically extremely vulnerable. And it's likely, our expectation is that the cohort of such residents will grow by about 12,000 over the coming weeks. And there's an important requirement to respond to that as best we can and make sure that those residents are as safe as possible. The other thing which has been really important and has been absolutely significant in Hertfordshire, as indeed across the rest of the United Kingdom, is the progress that's been made on vaccinations. And just like other parts of the country, a variety of sites have been provided, the so-called mass vaccination centres, of which there ultimately will be 7 in Hertfordshire, the hospital hubs, the facilities that have been provided by the primary care networks, by our GPs across Hertfordshire, and then also the facilities that have been provided by our local pharmacies. This has been an absolutely huge effort, which the public sector across Hertfordshire has been very much involved in, and I'm hugely proud of the work that's been done in order to secure the vaccination of our residents in cohorts 1 to 4. And as we look forward now, we will see our residents in cohorts 5 to 9 vaccinated over the coming months. So those are some important updates on the work that's been done across the public services in Hertfordshire to address the position since lockdown was introduced on the 4th of January. Can I now turn to Ralph Sangster to update us on some of the financial implications and some of the financial changes that have happened in recent weeks, particularly since this report was published? Ralph.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just going to focus on the macro numbers that are included in the report. We have now received just over £61 million of ring-fence grants and anticipate a further £8 million in compensation for lost income, totalling just over £69.5 million from government to support local services in Hertfordshire. The financial deficit between costs and receipts is now just around £4.5 million, with costs at around £74 million within our own organisation. The COVID costs for 2022 are now a point of focus for us, given the imminence of our budget proposals, and the cost for 2022 proposal is to be covered by the government's announcement of a £1.5 billion grant for local government, of which Herts County Council will be receiving some £21 million, and we're proposing to carry that forward into next year, along with any uncommitted contingency from our 2021 budget, to establish a £30 million fund in support of COVID-related costs in the 2022 period. So we are well placed to respond to the costs, which are going to be reasonably significant into the next year, with an advanced announcement from government in that respect. The additional the additional spend on COVID in its entirety for the county council related services is now £173 million. This includes the unring-fence funding, ring-fence funding for grants in relation to specific areas of responsibility, and funding received from the NHS in response to our support for them. So as well as our £850 million annual budget, we are now supplied, or are in the process of supplying, £173 million of additional services this year up to the end of March period. So it's been a significant effort on behalf of all of our organisation in bringing those services forward and providing them for local communities and individuals.
Thank you, Ralph. Are there any other comments, colleagues, in relation to the County Council's response to COVID-19 report? If not, then can we proceed to 4.1 on the order paper, namely that Cabinet notes the content of the report? And can I ask you to indicate in chat?
David, I think Richard is looking to come in.
Apologies, Richard, I couldn't see you. Richard, do you want to comment?
Chairman, the first thing I will do is find some high visibility clothing so that I can be more noticeable. Thank you for bringing me in. Since pretty much since Christmas Day until last week, the situation in care homes and our hospitals across the county was critical. And we had one care home where we had to decant the residents into Fairways and Nevitz, which were our own version of the Nightingale centres here in Hertfordshire. And thank goodness that we invested over £1 million in order for that facility to be available just when we needed it. The infection rates increased in our care homes, something like 7 or 8-fold in the space of a few days at Christmas, with resulting deaths, which is tragic. And there is a significant amount of bereavement across Hertfordshire as a result of variant 2 coming through, not just our care homes, but our communities. Echoing your thanks towards the vaccination programme, which has been nothing but miraculous, to add my thanks for the volunteers who have been standing out in sometimes absolutely freezing weather in order to make sure that our residents can get vaccinated, and my utmost thanks for them for all that they are doing. And just to say that as we speak now, only 5 or 6 weeks since the second variant came and washed over us, that infection rates are down both in staff and with residents, and the number of our care homes and care residences, particularly those with learning disabilities, is declining quite rapidly, and that is an excellent position to be in. So thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Richard, for that. So if I can invite colleagues to note the contents of the report as per 4.1 on the order paper. That's agreed, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item number 5, which are the items in relation to the Integrated Plan 2021-22 to 2024-25. And Ralph, can I ask you to introduce this, particularly in relation to the meeting of your Cabinet panel last week, and also the work that's been done to consult on the integrated plan proposals?
Yes, thank you, David. We undertake each year an engagement with our communities, both residents and others, to ascertain their views on the budget proposals and especially in particular in relation to the proposed increases in council tax. This year was a little bit different in so much as COVID clearly had an impact on our ability to prepare and to consult with the communities. And we were also in a difficult position because we didn't have, until very late in the day, sufficient information for us to be able to consolidate our thinking and our proposals in relation to the budget. So we usually consult pre-Christmas and provide residents with the opportunity and other groups with the opportunity of providing feedback over an extended period of time. This year, we engaged with the local communities in the period immediately after Christmas in January for 3 weeks. It was a shortened period, and we were able to, in this instance, provide people with the recommendations of what the proposed budget was going to be, rather than merely speculate on what it might have been, because we are not in a position to do so prior to Christmas. The response was around just under 1,000 participants, as well as some focus groups, which we brought together as a consequence of our inability to reach out to as many people as we perhaps would want to. The responses were skewed as usual towards the elderly in our communities, as opposed to the younger people who remain difficult to reach. But I think the focus groups that we chose tried to ascertain their input, and it was included in the overall assessment. The gender balance was about equal, so we managed to maintain a balance there. The results were strongly in support of the budget proposals. 37% either agreed or strongly agreed with the budget as it was constituted. 24% disagreed or strongly disagreed, and the balance made no comment either way. 60% of the respondents or thereabouts approved the 1.99% basic increase in the council tax, and 53% approved the additional 2% for adult social care. In some of the comments that came back, it's worthy noting the areas in which our residents consider that the focus of our approach to future savings should be in the areas of streamlining services. Well, of course, we do a considerable amount of that already in our Transform programme. Partnership working, clearly there is a scope for us to work with our other organisations and produce a better outcome. And the last one was helping people to help themselves, and I think that's something we are all aware of, and I think we need to drive towards in the future. And that was the general approach or the general results from the IP scrutiny. Sorry, the IP engagement.
Thanks, Ralph. So then the order paper goes on and reports on the discussions that happened at individual cabinet panels. And I don't know whether colleagues have got any points that they want to raise in terms of the discussions that happened at their own panels. Obviously, those have been separately recorded and minuted, etc. But those are listed in the order paper. So if there is no other input that people want to highlight at this stage, the proposal in front of us as far as the IP is concerned is namely that the comments of the Council's Cabinet panels on the integrated plan proposals be noted. So can I take that item now and ask colleagues to vote on noting the comments, please? Thank you. Those are agreed. Thank you. So let's move on to 5.3, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee report on the integrated plan proposals. And I'd just like to say first and foremost, I'd like to thank members for their participation in the scrutiny committee events and in the development of the report of the Scrutiny Committee, and in particular the role played by the senior officers and indeed by our graduates who supported them in terms of working with the individual scrutiny groups. As ever, when it comes to the Cabinet decisions in relation to those recommendations, there will be some recommendations that we want to accept and agree, and then there are others that Cabinet will want to note, recognising that maybe further consideration is needed in order to consider the recommendations, and further deliberations might be needed. So we have the recommendations in the order paper, colleagues, and I'd just like each individual executive member to just confirm in relation to each of the numbered recommendations whether they wish to note those recommendations or agree them. And the first area is community safety and waste management. So let me introduce Terry Hone to consider the recommendations 1 and 2.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, both the items really we have been there before, particularly around encouraging the Herts Waste Partnership, which of course is a representative body of all the districts and boroughs, plus Herts County Council, to further cooperation between the districts and boroughs and with the county to improve recycling, reduce the waste that we put into our bins, not only at curbside but also at our recycling centres. So yes, with number 1, we're keen, enthusiastic, and we'll continue that process. So I can agree that with no problems. The second one, which was as far as transport is concerned, of our waste, particularly our residual waste, whereby because we have not got an energy for waste facility in Hertfordshire, we would then, or an energy recovery facility, shall I say, in Hertfordshire, we have to ship our residual waste a long way out of county. That is polluting the atmosphere, and we're looking for a variety of ways of reducing that, one of which is by using rail. That is a very expensive and perhaps a big exercise. So we need support from the government on this, both physically and financially, to get some of our residual waste onto the railway so we can move it that way rather than with trucks. So I have no problems with supporting both those items which are on there, which we are doing anyway, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you, Terry. That's really helpful. Let's move on to education, libraries and localism. Terry Douris.
Thank you, Leader. With regard to item little 3, I would ask that is noted rather than agreed for technical reasons, the details of which you would find in the Cabinet papers. With regard to little 4, I would also ask that be noted, because that is actually, the reclaim for that is wrapped up with the whole corporate council reclaim of lost revenue. So I think it's more appropriate, please, that be noted rather than agreed.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Let's move on to highways and environment, and Phil Bibby.
Thank you, Leader. I need to mention that items 5 and 6 both relate to Derek Ashby's portfolio, which is the Growth and Infrastructure Cabinet Panel. I know he's happy with those recommendations, but he might wish to make mention when you get to him in the list.
Excellent, thanks, Phil. Public health and prevention, items 7 and 8, Tim. Tim, you need to unmute.
There's always one, isn't there? Yes, the first recommendation relates to our level of reserves. I'm quite comfortable at the moment we have them set to the right level, but accept that it's something that we need to keep a continuous eye on. So on that basis, I'm happy with that recommendation. The second recommendation relates to prevention activities. And what I would say with that is that is and has been front and centre of our activities ever since our current public health and prevention strategy was written in 2017. That now, of course, is due for refresh and will be over the coming months. And again, our pursuit of prevention activities will be followed. So again, I'm quite happy to accept that recommendation.
Great, thanks, Tim. So let's move on to 9, strategic review of the whole budget. And Ralph, can you comment on this particular recommendation?
Thank you. Yes, I'm more than happy to accept those proposals which were included in the recommendation.
Excellent, thanks. So we come to adult care and health, 10 and 11, Richard.
Thank you very much. Reception here, internet reception might just have declined rapidly. I think everybody's decided to go on the a call just at the same time. But if I can pick up 10 and 11, one of the first recommendation is a clear strategy to tackle the growing problem of digital exclusion. And I quote from page 40 of the IP, where our strategic direction is set out. Supporting people, supporting people needing assistance to prevent them from becoming digitally excluded through extending our work with the voluntary sector. So that is already in the IP. And the second one, which is that the Adult Care Service develop a new funding model for the voluntary and community sector. And I quote on page 41 of our strategic direction, co-produce an ambitious strategy for the voluntary sector, building on their crucial role in the COVID response. So I would suggest that there isn't a cigarette paper between the recommendations coming out of scrutiny and those that are already presented in the IP. Therefore, I note and absolutely support the recommendations. Thank you.
And in fact, agreeing it, yeah. Agreeing with the recommendation. Yes, excellent. Thanks, Richard. Teresa, children, young people and families.
Yes, so this is item 12. This is the scrutiny committee recommending that greater priority be given to the fostering strategy. I will note this, if I may, because actually we've already got a reinvigorated fostering strategy in train, as was reflected in a recent presentation by the fostering and adoption team to council colleagues not so long ago, probably after scrutiny though, so I accept their comments. So I would like to note this one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Derek Ashley, growth, infrastructure, planning and the environment.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll just pick up on 5.3 little 5 and little 6, which originally was listed under highways and environment. Under 5.3 little 5, I'm very happy to agree this recommendation. I'm very pleased that scrutiny came up with this recommendation because, frankly, I've been working on this all the time. So I'm pleased they came up with this recommendation. I can assure Council that we will continue to do that. Under little 6, I'm happy to agree that recommendation as well. Moving on to the later part of the order paper under growth, infrastructure, planning and environment under 5.3 little 13. I think this is a fair question. I think that we're all asking, and therefore I'm happy to agree that recommendation. Under 5.3 little 14, I'm happy to note that recommendation because we do have a scrutiny coming up later on into this very area, and I look forward to the outcome from that scrutiny. And under 15, I think at the moment we'll just note that we don't quite know where we're going to be in the next year or two after COVID, so I'm happy to note that recommendation. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Derek. And if we can go back to Ralph for those 3 items that relate particularly to resources.
Yes, thank you, David. The first item, I think 16, although it's similar to the similar to a proposal in the strategic review, it does have a slightly different context. So I'm more than happy to note this. The word that's particularly concern is property that are redundant. Redundant doesn't necessarily provide a good reason for disposal, because we may well want to retain the land for future use on other service departments. So it's really a language issue in that respect. So I'm more than happy to note it in the spirit that with which it was proposed, but note also that the language is necessarily a problem for me. Item 17, the middle one of the three, I don't have a problem with this. I'm more than happy to accept it. Item 18, I do have an issue in relation to the notes on ambition. I think being ambitious in terms of one's approach to cost savings and transformation is an extremely good position to be in. So I'm happy to note it. Wouldn't want necessarily to accept the criticism for being too ambitious.
Thank you, Ralph. So, colleagues, I'm going to ask that Cabinet agrees the recommendations at little 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 and 17, and if I can ask you, probably the easiest way to do is to vote on that separately now. So if I can ask you to vote on those which are agreed using the chat function. So that's unanimous and that's agreed. And so I'm asking Cabinet to note those recommendations at 3, 4, 12, 14, 15, 16 and 18. And so if colleagues are content, can they please indicate in...
Chairman, could I just clarify something? Chairman, could I just clarify that our comments in discussion on this item will be recorded in the minutes?
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will be.
Okay.
And obviously the session's being recorded, so that will be available for officers to pick up. And Deborah's confirmed that. Excellent. So that's agreed. So we are now moving on to agenda item number 5, part 4, the integrated plan and the full proposal in front of us, the detailed proposal. Ralph, is there anything that you want to add at this stage?
Yes, I'm not going to go through the whole report. I think the IP has been well publicised and discussed at scrutiny and other issues, other venues. What I do want to do is to address the issues that have changed, or the items that have changed in the IP since the scrutiny took place. So I'll focus on those. Since the last publication of the IP and its scrutiny, we have received updated tax revenue projections from precepting authorities. This has improved our anticipated receipts, and the movement is shown on table 4 on page 8 of the report. And I think it appropriate to explain how we propose to use those additional funds. The IP has already responded to service level concerns regarding the pressures of COVID on individual service departments. As our thinking has moved beyond that, however, immediate response, it is becoming clear that the pandemic will have longer term impacts, including on inequalities within society. So this is being driven through a number of factors, including the impact of employment and schools. Although we have deployed additional funds available in this year's budget to address these issues, The availability of additional revenue means we can go further. Research from the Institute of Fiscal Studies has identified that inequality will have a serious impact on sectors of our society. With the availability of these additional funds, we have taken the opportunity to establish an inequalities fund to support, among other areas of concern, economic recovery, investment in skills, greater support for families and children's well-being and education, and isolation and mental health. We propose allocating an additional 5.5 million in 2022 to respond to the anticipated post-COVID surge, and 2 million each of the following 3 years to address the systemic inequalities within the system. The balance of the additional funds will be set against future ongoing deficits, noting that we need to find a further £25 million of savings by 2025. We've already covered the principal responses from our public engagement on the IP and the support for the proposed tax rises in an earlier paper. It is proposed, therefore, that the council tax will increase by 1.99% for the basic level and a rise of 2% in the adult social care precept, postponing a further permitted 1% until 22-23. The total revenue budget for 2022 will now rise to 87 million. Our capital programme for 2022 has been set at 366 million. And following a review of our reserves, the Section 151 officer has recommended an increase in our general reserves to 6% of our annual budget at 52 million. I will reserve any further comments until the budget debate to be held at tomorrow's council meeting.
Ralph, thanks for that clarification. And colleagues, any comments or questions? Terry.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Just to draw colleagues' attention to the recommendations, and in particular item little 6 regarding the school's budget be set at the level of the dedicated schools grant, including any use of any carry forward DSG as set out on the order paper, and noting the ability of the Director for Resources in consultation with the Director of Children's Services and the relevant executive members and the Schools Forum be authorised to amend the budget in the light of any changes that may come forward. And I would make that recommendation, please, Chairman.
Terry, thank you for highlighting the position of the dedicated schools grant. Okay, are there any other questions? If not, let's then move straight to a vote on the recommendations as set out, as I said, at 5.4, that Cabinet approved the final version of the integrated plan as set out in this report and confirmed in the appended tables, and to recommend to the County Council that the integrated plan be adopted. Thank you, colleagues. I think that's been agreed. It has been agreed unanimously. Excellent. Thank you. And I just want to say, in many respects, the points that Ralph was highlighting in some respects just underscored the complexity of the budget process this year. On the one hand, dealing with the additional funding that we've received and which we've largely expended as a result of the funding in relation to COVID, the projections going forward next year, and those difficult questions to understand and appreciate the extent to which certain things, contractual arrangements with the health service, the provision of PPE, the provision of support for all manner of different initiatives, including the vaccination process, have made all of those things have made preparing a budget extremely complex and difficult this year, and a huge credit must go to our senior officers and the 151 officer, Scott Crudgington, and but in addition, I'd also want to highlight Stephen Pillsworth as well for the work that he's done, and the work that the resources team led by Ralph have demonstrated. So many thanks to them for dealing with a very difficult set of circumstances. So I now want to move on to agenda item number 6 on the order paper, namely Adult Care Services commissioned care provider financial support during COVID-19. And Richard, can you introduce this for us, please?
Thank you, Chairman. You'll be aware that since March of last year, we have worked hand in glove with our care providers, and whenever grants have become available from government, the scale of which Ralph was highlighting earlier, we have passported those and worked so closely with them to make sure that they have the appropriate PPE or staff support or anything else for that matter. This, in a sense, is a proactive approach if, for example, government funding isn't available beyond April of this year. So with 2 scenarios set out in the paper, one without PPE and one with PPE, we have a range of need that may arise between 4 and 9 million, and have decided that it would be a very sensible and precautionary approach to set aside £5 million in contingency for supporting our care providers with whatever they need in terms of PPE and extra staffing costs, as we have done since March of 2020. I don't think this is a particularly contentious paper, and I think is simply looking forward as a just-in-case scenario where we can still continue to support care providers as necessary. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Richard. Any comments or questions, anybody? If not, can I move the proposal at 6.1 on the order paper, please, and ask you to indicate in chat whether you are for, against, or abstaining. Some interesting little noises coming through from somewhere on as the votes go through. That's agreed. Thanks, Deborah, for confirming that. Let's move on to agenda item number 7, Highways 2021-22 Integrated Works and Procurement Routes. Phil Bivvy.
Thank you, Leader. This is the annual ratification of the Integrated Works Programme. The key issues here this year are that since we have achieved our target for improvements to unclassified roads through investor improved funding 2 years early, we have been able to scale down that funding, but we still have committed schemes in the IWP which are to be completed spread over the next 2 years. With the additional funding for drainage, active travel and 20-mile-an-hour zones, any new work from those schemes will be programmed and fed into the IWP. And I would like to ask Cabinet to note that although the IWP looks like a simple works programme, a great deal of organisation, prioritisation, permitting and traffic management is necessary to get these jobs on the ground. And this year Cabinet is asked to approve the IWP and budget related budgets, the street lighting programme and its own budget, together with the budgets for the climate change response, active travel fund and 20 MPH fund, noting the proposed procurement routes to get us in the right direction. So I'd ask Cabinet to actually approve the recommendations as voted through by my Cabinet panel. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. Any comments or questions, anybody? If not, we have the proposal at 8 on the order paper that Cabinet agree the highway. Sorry, that at 7.1 on the order paper, we agree the integrated works programme. And yes, if you can indicate in.
Chairman, I agree, but for some reason I've dropped out of chat.
Thanks, Derek. I don't know if it's you whistling in the background as well, but
I don't think so, because I was on mute just now.
Don't worry. Okay. I think I've seen everybody's votes go through, so, and that's agreed. Thanks, Deborah. So let's move on to agenda item number 8, Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Plan, Asset Performance Report for 2019. Sorry, that should be 2021, presumably, Phil.
Correct, yes, and thank you for stating that the heading is quite a mouthful, so I won't repeat it. But this document comes to Cabinet every year for sort of perusal. For the last year, this shows a very good performance by the Highway Service, but I would like to highlight some key indications. For the 4th year in a row, we have been successful in achieving top-tier funding from the DFT Incentive Fund. If we had not, we would have lost out on 70% of the available funding, or in real terms, £12 million for the year. The condition of our A roads is now 3% and our B and C roads are 5%, comparing very favourably with national trends. And the most pleasing is the improvement in our unclassified roads to 7%. You'll remember that this was 16% before we committed the Invest Improve funding, stating that our target would be 8%, which we've actually overachieved two years early. We've commenced the following major reviews this year or for the next year. The road hierarchy review, informed by our new place and movement approach, although we don't anticipate much change. Drainage review, which has already been triggered by the climate emergency and the increased flooding incidents we're seeing. Now, thankfully, we have a budget to tackle the flooding issues, and that will form part of our integrated works programme going forward. We are also reviewing our maintenance schedule, asking ourselves on our continuous improvement strategy, have we got the balance right? These 3 streams are major pieces of work, but are necessary to inform our new highways contracts, which will be soon negotiated for signing in 2024. Cabinet is simply asked to agree the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. Derek, did you want to come in? No. Okay. Any other comments? Anybody?
Agreed.
Richard, did you want to come in?
I did.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to, with the Invest to Improve funding, Phil, we've come down, we've more than halved our improvement, if you like, or doubled our improvement in our unclassified roads. But am I right in thinking we've still got 2 years of funding left to improve that further?
Yes, we have. As I said in the IWP section, we've got committed schemes in the IWP for the next 2 years, which are costing us about £8 million. So it's £8 million of funding still going into the Invest to Improve. So what I don't anticipate, if I'm still around in 2 years' time, reporting to Cabinet a significant improvement in unclassified roads still.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Richard. So can I ask colleagues to vote on the proposal at 8.1 that Cabinet agrees the Highway Infrastructure Asset Management Plan Performance Report? I think that is agreed. I've lost my chat at the moment. Yes, it is. Thanks, Deborah. Let's move on to agenda item number 9, the approval of the strategic outline case for the redevelopment of the Longfield Joint Emergency Services Academy. Terry Hone.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, JESSA, as it's sometimes known, I'll abbreviate to. The current Longfield site, which is just outside of Stevenage, is a facility which is owned by Herts County Council and has been the core training facility for Herts Fire and Rescue for a number of years. It also is a facility which is used by the police planning commissioner and his team, and also a facility which is occasionally used by the ambulance service and by businesses who want training for their staff to understand what they need to do, for example, in event evacuation. So it is a well-used site. That being said, it is a well-used site, and as such, it needs to maintain a certain level of standard of training, particularly for our firefighters. So the JESSA building has been identified as a site that is reaching the end of its life, really. It has a significant backlog of repairs and maintenance, which really will be required to, we will require to spend a lot of money to get it up to a standard, which will be a basic standard, which that basic standard will probably not meet the standards we need to have for the future to train our firefighters. There will be a significant risk that the firefighting training will become compromised as a result that the Fire and Rescue Service will be unable to deliver its statutory services or adequately maintain firefighter safety. So we need to do something on this. Let me add that it is not just us. There is a memorandum of understanding between us and the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, in relation to further cooperation and collaboration between the two emergency services, which includes the development of the JESSA. It also includes the development of the headquarters building at Stanborough that the police have, where we will decant our leadership team sooner or later in its entirety. So going back to the JESSA in particular, we really do want to, say it's ambition really, of the Fire and Rescue Service and the Herts Constabulary, and it's outlined in the memorandum of understanding, as I mentioned earlier, to relocate and centralise emergency services training at a modern fit-for-purpose facility at Longfield. That's the key to it, fit for purpose. And so we attach a strategic outline case that's been prepared, drawing on the expertise of colleagues from the Fire and Rescue Service, of course, from our property, our finance and legal and improvement team, as well as specialist building construction firm known as Mace, who've helped us to do this. The SOC sets out the investment required to develop the full business case, and that's the next step. Officers will develop that business case, and we expect to see that in the autumn of this year, and we're looking forward to seeing what it is. In developing the strategic outline case, several options were developed and discounted. The preferred option is to deliver the construction project of a target cost of £34.4 million, including the contingency. Yes, £34.4 million. This is probably the biggest single construction investment by Herts County Council in living memory. It is significant, to say the least. It is expected that there will be funding contribution of around about £5 million at the moment. It could be more, could be less, but that's all depending on specifications from the Herts Constabulary. The SOC seeks approval for £600,000 to support the next stage of the programme. And in doing so, I move the recommendations in my name.
Terry, thank you for that. Yes, clearly a very important investment for not only the Fire and Rescue Service, but also the Herts Constabulary as well. Any comments or questions for Terry? If not, therefore, can we consider the recommendations at 9.1 on the order paper and vote in chat accordingly? So item 9 is agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Agenda item number 10, Q3 Finance Budget Monitor. Ralph.
Thank you, David. I'd just like to cover a few items here. Some of them is duplication of information already provided, but nevertheless, I think it's worthy of repeating. Draw colleagues' attention to the table 1 on the top of page 5, which gives an overview of the current revenue balances. Although there is a projected small surplus of 1.8 million currently, I would also draw executive members' attention to the narrative below it, which explains the risks and uncertainties which remain as an ongoing concern. I think it's important that we don't necessarily get carried away here, in so much as we have completed 3 quarters of the year. The last quarter of any year is always the most volatile. And I think we need to be ready for issues that may come forward that need attention or will affect the overall position. You'll note that the COVID deficit, as mentioned earlier, is about 4.5 million, but this is offset by service savings of 6.3 million, which gives us the surplus of 1.8. Again, as was mentioned earlier, the future for COVID costs for the coming year has been addressed by a table at the top of page 8. Which identifies the proposal that proportion of the government's additional 1.5 billion and our unused contingency for 2021 be carried forward to 2022, and that will produce a fund of some £30 million. The projected costs of COVID in 2022 are mostly associated with adult social care and our capital projects, which for the first time we've included in our Delta returns to central government. And they potentially reduce this overall £30 million fund by 17.5 to 12.5 million. And that's to cover all our other COVID related costs in the coming year. I'd just like to express, as David did earlier, my gratitude to our finance team fully. I will do so fully at tomorrow's council meeting, but I must commend them today for the way in which they have managed and controlled the council's funds over what can only be described as an interesting year. So thank you, team, and I'll say a few more words about that tomorrow at the council meeting.
Thank you, Ralph. Any questions or comments, colleagues? If not, therefore, we are asked to note the contents of the report at 10.1 in the order paper. Can I ask you to indicate in chat, please, whether you are for, against, or abstaining? That's agreed. Thank you. So, agenda item number 11, to consider financial reinvestment in Bishop Stortford's Young People's Centre. Teresa.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, today I'm seeking Cabinet's agreement for the reinvestment of capital receipts received from the grant of a long lease of the Bishop Stortford Young People's Centre playing field to improve and redevelop the premises. The centre is a Hertfordshire County Council freehold located at the North Gate End, immediately to the north side of the Link Road in Bishop Stortford. The centre comprises a building, a small car park, a grassed outdoor activity space, and it is in a conservation area, but the building is not listed. The centre is the only YCH service for young people provision in Bishop Stortford and surrounding areas. It is used extensively by YCH services for the delivery of all sorts of local targeted projects to young people and for the vulnerable young people aged 11 to 17 and up to 24 for vulnerable groups. It is also the delivery venue for various activities such as providing information and advice to those young people who are NEET, and sexual health services for young people and young adults in Bishop Stortford. The centre is also used by Home Farm Audit Adult Learning Disabilities Group, the Army Cadets and Children's Taekwondo and other community groups. In 2020, the council agreed to the long lease of the majority of the centre's playing field to East Herts District Council to enable a multi-storey car park to be built to free up the current car parking space area at Old River Lane to support the redevelopment of the town centre. The grant of the long lease to East Herts District Council realised a capital receipt of £790,000 that had not been forecast, but the loss of the land behind the youth centre has impacted on the external provision for the service. The building requires investment to able to offer young people services in the future, given the increasing development in the area, and there has not been any investment in the building for 4 years. Therefore, capital and revenue is required. Once refurbished, the Young People's Centre will include a brand new independent living skills kitchen, a bespoke gym for young people to focus on boosting their physical health and emotional well-being, and a music studio. A wide range of youth projects will be directly delivered from here for the benefit of young people, including projects for the learning disabled, young parents, young LGBTQ+, emotional wellbeing projects, and Bishop Stortford Youth Forum. The capital receipt would be supplemented by £80,000 of Section 106 monies, which have yet to be identified and agreed, and £120,000 from the Youth Centre Refurbishment Works capital project. This is part of the integrated process, to give a total budget of £990,000. I think this would be a really good project because young people should be invested in now. They've had a really hard time. The effects of COVID-19 and the uncertainty on their education and future employment. So we need to think about what they need going through in the future. There will be a real boon to the young people in the district, and so I hope you will support the recommendation. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Teresa, thank you. Ralph.
Yeah, I just wanted to lend my support to this project. I'd also like to thank the property team who managed the negotiations with East Herts District Council. Don't want to over-egg it just in case East Herts are listening, but I think they did a magnificent job in securing the funds that they did. And along with the other funds which Teresa has identified, it's going to be just shy of £1 million to be invested in what I understand will be a new central hub for children's services in this location. It's very central. It's going to be an exceptionally good building once it's been refurbished. And I think it sets a pattern for other opportunities across the county for us to centralise and to provide excellent services such as the one that's going to be provided from here.
Ralph, thanks for those comments, which I wholeheartedly endorse. Any other comments or questions, anybody? If not, let's consider the proposal at 11.1 on the order paper, therefore, and ask you to indicate in chat. I think that's everybody, and that's agreed. Yes, thanks again, Deborah. Item 12 on the agenda: Hertfordshire County Council admission arrangements for 2022-23. Terry Douris.
Thank you, Chairman. I have switched my microphone on, but it was seeming to have a bit of a mind of its own, so bear with me if it suddenly turns off. There are 4 items to this. If we wish to consult, we have to consult widely. If we don't wish to make any changes to the admission arrangements, we don't have to consult for a period of 7 years. But this year we are consulting. We went out, and I have to say it was disappointing, the fact that we only got 25 responses to the consultation covering all 4 items in the recommendations, which is good, because I think it probably demonstrates the fact that the majority of people are for it, but it's disappointing that we didn't get that many. The first item is the definition of the nearest school. This was brought to us by the Diocese of St Albans, because they recognised that if you had a very hard definition that relied on faith, that could actually work against the ability of local children potentially to go to their local school. And this is something that the diocese were very keen on promoting, local schools for local people. And so we are changing, and we are proposing to change, and it's been through, as indeed all the 4 items have been through the Education, Libraries and Localism panel, and have been agreed at that panel, to change the definition of the nearest school to allow those children who may not be of a faith but are very local to have the opportunity to get to their local school. The second element is relating to the allocation of places for twins and multiple births. Now, currently, this is only applicable if you are the sibling of a child who is the last allocated place, and that's inherently unfair, it is felt. And so what we are proposing here is that the sibling of any child, or the multiple birth sibling, is included in the ability to join that school. The third item is the reduction in the number, the PAN, from 45 of 1.5 forms of entry to 1 form of entry of Markyate Village School. I have to declare a non-pecuniary interest of any sort insofar as that happens to sit within my division of Bridgwater. Historically, the number of children over 30 in numbers have been almost non-existent, and so it's entirely appropriate to reduce the number to 30. And that will actually bring a benefit, and it's been supported and indeed promoted by the governors of the school, because it will bring a level of financial stability to the school, both in terms of money and also in being able to plan, because you're planning for a 1 form of entry school, which is basically what it is, rather than having the, if you like, you might say, the sort of Damocles hanging over your head that it's a 1.5 form of entry school. So that is that. Interestingly, I think there were 5 people who responded to that item. And then the fourth one is really just the catch-all, which is to note the remainder of the Hertfordshire County Council admissions arrangements and to agree those for the forthcoming year. And on that basis, I move the recommendations on the order paper in front of me, but happy to answer any questions.
Terry, thank you. Any questions for Terry? All pretty straightforward. So can I ask colleagues to vote in chat on that proposal? So that's agreed. So thank you for that. Let's move on then to the final item on our agenda item number 13, the capital funding approval to support the delivery of education provision in Stevenage. And there is a part 2 report that is part of this item, but there are no recommendations in part 2. And so, colleagues, if we can discuss all of this in part one, so much the better. But Terry Douris.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I was reminded, actually, hearing Ralph Sangster making comments regarding the youth provision in Bishop Stortford and how good it is to actually have a new building and a new provision. And this item comes from the fact that Michaela School, which currently has a school in Brent, and which both I and my deputy Mark Mills Bishop have visited, and it's a very interesting school as well, with a head teacher of Miss Birbal Singh, who is making quite a name for herself across the education firmament. They have been awarded or made a successful bid to open a new school on the site that is currently known as Barnwell East, which was formerly the Collinswood site in Stevenage. Now that site also included the Stevenage Education Support Centre, and as part of the rebuilding of the site for the new Michaela School, it would mean a relocation of the ESC. And we were really confronted with two options here. One would be to deal with the existing buildings and to try and refurbish them, and frankly, they are older buildings. The alternative is to recognise that we have some Section 106 money. We know that in Part 1 we are seeing some Section 106 money allocated. We also know that there will be a significant amount of Section 106 money coming as a result of further developments. The building will be constructed by the Department for Education as part of the larger whole project, but we have set aside exactly what we want, and that will be agreed. And it provides new build accommodation for the Stevenage Education Support Centre, and it will operate, and I need to make this very clear, it will operate as an independent unit from the Michaela School. So I know that there's been a little bit of chat thinking that it was part of the Michaela School, but it's not. It's still the separate ESC. The funding that's being requested here, both in Part 1 and indeed Part 2, but particularly Part 2, is forward funding in advance of funding that we will receive, and the documents have been signed, the agreements have been signed, and it is a question of the development taking place going forward. I think that's all I need to say, except that I am, as ever with new builds in the education field, hugely excited by this, because it will provide a facility for young people for whom at any one point in time mainstream education provision may not be quite right for them, and it will allow them to refocus and perhaps get back into mainstream education in a facility and in a building or in buildings that are fit for the purpose, not just for now, but for the future, and we owe it to the young people of Stevenage. I move the recommendations.
Thank you, Terry. And so, colleagues, if anybody does want to discuss the contents of the report in Part 2, do let me know. But I will assume that you don't, unless you tell me otherwise. Phil, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously as a Stevenage member, this isn't in my division, but it affects Stevenage children. So I welcome this report. Thank you very much to Terry and your colleagues. So it's all good for Stevenage. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really important investment, and we've touched a couple of times on inequalities, and we really must do as much as we possibly can to support those children for whom, as Terry said, mainstream at any one point in time may not be the right place for them to be in terms of their time in education. So I'm going to ask colleagues to, assuming that we don't need to go into Part 2, therefore, that we consider the recommendations at 13.1 on the order paper, and as before, indicate in chat whether you are for, against, or abstaining. So that is agreed, colleagues. Thank you. That concludes our meeting for this afternoon. Thank you for your contributions, and no doubt we'll be catching up again tomorrow as we meet for the session of the County Council. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Cheers.